Hi, this is Dr. Mercola, and I'm excited to share some information with you for the Health Freedom Summit 2022, specifically on strategies to help you become more resilient. So many of you may know that I've been around for a while. I've been actually a family physician for nearly 40 years. And the first 10 years of that, I really wasn't focusing so much on natural medical strategies and got brainwashed and propagandized into the conventional medical thinking on this. But for the last 30 years, I've really been focusing on it. What I want to do is take the wisdom I've compiled in the last 30 years or so and focusing on these natural strategies and share the best of the best with you and specifically fine tune it for what you need to do to prepare yourself in light of what's happened in the last 2 years. So in an effort to start that, let me do a screen share. Okay, now we see a famous quote from Mark Twain. It's easier to fool people than to convince them that they've been fooled. And that's certainly what's been done in spades and largely responsible for contributing to the mass formation psychosis that has been so cleverly and strategically deployed by the global cabal. So if you're watching this, you have not been fooled. So congratulations. But I've been seeking to share this type of information for over a quarter century. I started my website in 1997. Which is 2 years before Google started theirs, actually maybe a year before. So, and Google is a big part of this problem. They're really a huge contribution to what's going wrong with everything and why they've been able to successfully pull this type of intervention off. But because I've been doing this so long, I've been identified as there's a group of a dozen or so of us who are identified as a disinformation dozen. And they name me as number one, is providing the collectively 2/3 of the misinformation on this topic of COVID-19. But that was based on the assertions of a CCDH, which is the Center for Countering Digital Hate, a company out of the UK that's only less than 2 years old and absolutely funded by dark money. It's a front group. So none of the mainstream media a journalist ever decided to fact check this source that was used by CNN and New York Times, Washington Post, and a wide variety of other publications, in addition to the White House, specifically calling us out as being this. And when Facebook actually looked into this, they found that instead of 67% of the misinformation, we were less than 0.5% collectively. So, but that's part of their campaign to keep you fooled. So as I said, I'm going to give you the best of the best information I have on how you can improve your health. So let's start with vitamin D. I've been a long proponent of that for the last 2.5 decades or so. And in October of 2020, I wrote a paper with 2 other authors that you can find for free on PubMed for National Library of Medicine. And that's the title of that. And you just have to type that in the search engine, it'll come up and you can get the full access to the article. You could also go to stopcovidcold.com, which is a website that doesn't require you to enter your email. And basically it's all free information we put together that compiles it into easier to understand information. It goes into a lot more details than I can with this limited time frame. So the key though, is that you're going to need to optimize your vitamin D level of 60 to 80 nanograms per milliliter. If you are watching this from Canada or overseas, it would be 150 to 200 nanomoles per liter. That is an ideal. Now, if you're not getting the sun exposure, which I recommend, I strongly recommend, you would need about 8,000 units a day during the winter to achieve this level. But this is new, and this is not information I'm sure almost every single one of you have heard before, but it's important to emphasize, especially and putting it into priority perspective, what is important, what is more important. So this is probably one of the most important things, but what you haven't heard before, and what very, very few clinicians understand and fail to appreciate, is that this vitamin D should come from the sun. It should not come from a pill that you are swallowing. Now, I know that's not possible for many of you who live in the north during the winter, but even if you lived in the subtropics, many of you wouldn't do it, as many people in subtropics fail to do it because they're indoors all the time. So you were designed to be exposed to the sun on your skin, despite what the dermatologists tell you to prevent you from getting skin cancer. And the third item on this list is actually what contributes to people getting skin cancer. So I'm going to hold you in suspense for that one. But the sun is not the reason why you're getting skin cancer. Yes, you should have sensible skin exposure. You shouldn't ever get sunburned. But when you're getting enough sunshine, sensible sun exposure on your exposed skin, you are going to have access to UVB, ultraviolet B radiation, which creates the vitamin D in your skin and then gets transferred into your blood and then is metabolized to its active form. Assuming you're taking enough of the correct nutrients in your diet, those would be vitamin K2 and magnesium, which are also very important to return to the active form. But what most people, so it's nice to get your vitamin D for free. That's the way you were designed to do it. And I personally have not swallowed any vitamin D pill for over a decade, maybe 13 years. My vitamin D levels are between 60 and 80 nanograms, depending on what time of the year I have. But it's even 60 in the winter. So you can do it. It is possible. But in addition to optimizing your vitamin D, what may be every bit as important, and this is pretty brand new information, very, very few people understand this, and certainly clinicians, is that you're going to want to have exposure to not only the ultraviolet, but the near and far infrared rays, which actually collectively are far more of the spectrum from the sunlight. So why? Because when you're exposed to those, you're going to get nitric oxide increase and, most importantly, melatonin. And this is a nice little graph showing the wavelength spectrums. We're typically familiar with those in size of the wavelengths within nanometers. So UVB is about 320 nanometers, which is smaller and lower frequency than higher frequency than the visible light, and certainly the infrared, red and near infrared. So, but the near infrared has been well documented to increase, this is the key, melatonin levels within your mitochondria. And it does this through some very sophisticated mechanisms, but essentially you get it for free when you get out in the sun with the sunlight on your skin. So this is one of probably the most important strategies you can do to implement to have your body receive the nutrition, the sunlight nutrition it needs and requires to perform optimally. And melatonin is a very, very powerful antioxidant. When you fail to increase the levels in your mitochondria, you're going to run into a whole wide variety of problems. But one of the main ones is you're going to increase mitochondrial dysfunction. So that's not something you want to do. So moving on to step 2 for your health and developing improved resiliency is you want to compress your eating window. That is to decrease your time that you're eating between 6 and 8 hours. So that would mean 16 to 18 hours you aren't eating. This is important because over 90% of the people eat over 12 hours a day. And you don't want to be one of those 90% of people. You want to be in the group that compresses your eating window so that you can improve your metabolic flexibility, decrease your insulin resistance, and make your body work the way it's designed to. This is independent of any food you're eating. Just simply restricting the number of hours that you're eating is going to be hugely important, especially important to not eat before you go to bed. So having 3 to 4 hours of space between your last food that you eat and the time you go to sleep. So simple thing to do. Either of these recommendations don't cost you anything. They are free. So the third one that I want to get into is the exclusion of vegetable oils, but more accurately called seed oils. And why? Because they are loaded with a very dangerous fat called omega-6. And you've heard of them previously described before, I'm sure, as an essential fat. Essential, meaning your body requires it because it can't make it. And that is true. But the reason why that's a bunch of hogwash and absolute utter nonsense is that it's virtually impossible to eat any food, almost any food, any significant quantity of food, and not get omega-6. It's in virtually every food that you eat. So you're going to get it by eating foods. You don't have to worry about checking your levels. You have to worry about getting too much. And this is the key. I mean, this will turn your life around. And the reason why this is so much more dangerous than sugar, which is commonly perceived by many natural medical physicians as being the biggest danger in your diet, and surely excessive sugar, especially in the form of fructose or high fructose corn syrup, is not something you want to consume regularly. But when you compare it to the danger of these seed oils, there's no comparison. In my view, it's at least exponentially worse, 10 times worse. Why? Because when you eat sugar, your body can digest it within hours. Yes, it will spike your blood sugar levels likely, especially if you don't have a lot of muscle mass, and it will decrease insulin resistance over time, or increase insulin resistance over time. But it's gone in a few hours. These seed oils stay embedded into your cell membranes and can stick around for 7 years before you're able to get them out of your body. They're ruining your health for 7 years. That's why you can't get them in your body to begin with. You just don't want them. Now, it's all a matter of quantity. So because as I said, they are essential. Your body requires them. But if you go back, turn the clock back 150 years ago, before we as a civilization acquired the ability to mechanically process these seeds into oils, that only about 0.6 to 1.7% of the total calories of our diet was linoleic acid, or LA for short. So that first started in about the late 1800s or so. And then we skip forward almost 100 years. You can see that as early as 1955, rather than having 1% to 2% of the fat in our cell membranes, in cells in general, being linoleic acid, it had boosted up to 9.1%. And in 2008, which is 14 years ago, I don't have data for the more current ones, it's up to 21.5%. So we literally have tenfold, an exponential up on this fatty acid. Now, if you didn't get any of this fatty acid and somehow were able to get a linoleic acid free diet, you would die, no question. But as I said, that is virtually impossible to do if you're eating food. But when you increase this tenfold, I believe this is the single biggest factor contributing to chronic degenerative disease and the many epidemics we're having of heart disease and cancer and Alzheimer's and obesity and being overweight. I mean, just think about it, folks. We know that 43% of the population of the United States, 43% as of today, is obese, not overweight, obese. And we're going to be at 50%. 1 out of every 2 people will be obese by the end of this decade. So big reason for this is that we're having too many seed oils. And it's not a calorie thing. It's what happens when these calories aren't just metabolically. What happens, as you can see on this slide, is that it increases massively oxidative stress. And these fatty acids, the linoleic acid, actually cascades into what's called the oxalams, or the oxidative linoleic acid metabolites. And examples of those would be 4-HNE, methoxyglycosol, and acrolein. So these metabolites will clearly lead to increased metabolic mitochondrial dysfunction and failure. They actually die and cause your mitochondria to die prematurely, and insulin resistance. Huge issue. And this is a big reason why some people are not, don't have the energy that they need, because it will damage your mitochondria. And in your mitochondria, you're going to produce 85, maybe 90%, depending on what you're doing, of your cellular energy in the form of ATP. And that becomes seriously impaired by a massive increase in oxidative stress. So let's get down to basics. How do you avoid this? Well, one of the most common sources of linoleic acid in the United States diet is chicken. Why? Because chicken is fed grains, and it doesn't have them, but unlike a cow who could feed grains, although they're never designed, they're really designed to eat grass, but they can eat grains, and they have so many different stomachs that they have the bacterial component to metabolize that linoleic acid. So in beef, your linoleic acid never really goes that high, maybe a few percent. Chicken, it can go 20, 30%. And the same thing with pork. So you want to stay away from chicken and pork. And then a lot of people are concerned about olive or avocado oils. Well, those can be high. They have about 20%. And this assuming that the olive or the avocado oil was not adulterated. And 70 to 80% of these oils in the United States are adulterated. They're watered down, except not watered down, they're oiled down with these cheap vegetable oils like safflower and sunflower. And essentially, they're very, very high in linoleic acid. So if you're going to have olive oil or avocado oil, make sure it's from a reputable manufacturer. And then I would still limit it to a tablespoon, no more than a tablespoon a day. It is not something you want to be having multiple tablespoons of. You've got to stay away from processed foods. This is not rocket science. As I said, the biggest danger in processed foods are these seed oils. It's not the sugar. So, but you shouldn't have any processed foods, ideally. I've actually relatively recently have been able to eliminate every single processed food in my diet. So I'm just eating real whole foods, which is something I encourage all of you to do. You want to be really, really careful of all seeds and nuts. There's really only one nut that is acceptable, and that's a macadamia nut. And even when you have those, you don't really want to have more than an ounce or two a day. But they're really low in linoleic acid. They're relatively high in protein, and they're low in other things like oxalates, which are really high in almonds. So stay away from seeds and nuts. Generally, that's a confusion because many people view these as health foods, but it doesn't mean you have to avoid them. If you had a Brazil nut or a walnut, one or two a day of those a day are not going to be a problem because it'll keep you within the acceptable range of linoleic acid. But very few of us are going to eat that few, so or that little. So we're going to, they're easy to obtain, and you don't have to shell them, and you can just eat handfuls of them, and it's going to get you in trouble. So if you want to know for sure how much linoleic acid is in your diet in the form of omega-6, you can use an app called Chronometer, CRONOMETER.com, and you can basically establish an account and input your foods, and it will tell you within a tenth of a gram exactly how many you're getting. You want to keep your level of linoleic acid down to below 10 grams and preferably below 7 grams per day. Most of you are having 80 grams of linoleic acid. 80, you would be shocked at every food, isn't it? If you go to the trouble of using an app like Chronometer, you'll really be surprised. Okay, so those are my top 3 tips. Hopefully you enjoyed those. And I'm going to go into another strategy that's going to be really, really imperative, and that Google is not your friend. Absolutely not your friend. Now, I reviewed this before and interviewed Dr. Robert Epstein, who's a sociologist out of Harvard. So Shoshana Zuboff also has written on this and has many podcasts on YouTube that discuss this. 92% of the searches in the world are done on Google. They own the search field, and they are a surveillance mechanism that captures your personal data. They're basically everything. They manipulate your behavior, and they use this to basically control society in conjunction with the global cabal. I mean, they are a big, huge part of the global cabal. And believe me, they are the enemy. If you've ever watched the Terminator series, Google is Skynet. Just remember that. They are Skynet. They are something that needs to be avoided at all costs. So how do you do that? Well, you want to ditch these apps. First of all, you never want to use Google search. I mean, not never, but virtually rarely ever use it. The sad tragedy is it used to be the best search engine on the planet until they started implementing their nefarious strategies and behaviors. But now everything's manipulated. You cannot find the truth. I mean, they took many of us out of a Google search engine 4 years ago now, 4 years, 3.5 years, 4 years ago. And so it used to be an amazing, the internet. See, the internet is great. All the information, anyone could put it up there, but the issue is how to find it. So that's why you need a search engine. And Google they really excelled and did the best, and they provided an enormous service and still do for some topics. But for many of the important ones, like freedom and health and truth, they're going to obfuscate the data and hide it, essentially make it unavailable to you. So don't use Google search, but you shouldn't use their browser, Chrome. Just stay out of Chrome. You should very rarely ever use Chrome. I mean, you could have it up as a fake account and just to put information in there that you don't want them to make them think you're looking at this and you're really not, because everything you type into Chrome or Google search is being recorded indefinitely, permanently on your specific profile used against you to manipulate you. So you don't want to do that. And it is shocking. It is beyond shocking how many people use Google Gmail as their primary email service. I mean, it's it's probably 35 to 40% of people are using Gmail. If you're one of those 35, 40%, please, please, please understand you do not want to use Gmail. It can be a backup or used for information that's absolutely unimportant, but every character you put into your Gmail or send to someone who has a Gmail account is recorded, captured, totally used and against you in the future to manipulate your behavior. The other one that not as many people use, but is along the same lines, is Google Docs. Every character you type into Google Docs is recorded against you. So stay away from those applications. So what can you use? First of all, the best, this is unequivocally, every expert I've reviewed is consistent with this. The best browser out there right now to date, no comparison, no competition, is Brave. Brave is the browser to use. It was actually, I believe, developed by the initial founder of Firefox, who bailed on Firefox and started Brave. It is a totally privacy oriented, and you can see this is actually, it will block trackers and block ads on the pages that you're viewing, save you bandwidth and time. So you can look on my upper left on this screen, and you'll see that at the time I recorded the screen, nearly 3 million trackers and ads were blocked, saving almost 100 gigabytes, probably is over 100 gigabytes because this is an old screenshot. So it can not only preserve your privacy, but it will also make your browsing much more efficient. It has the same, and it is not hard to transition over. It's built on the same type of software called Chromium that Chrome uses. So it can use the same extensions and the same favorites and the same bookmarks. So you can transfer all your favorites and all your bookmarks easily. I mean, literally, it's a few minutes to switch over, and you're not losing anything. You're gaining privacy. So it's pretty cool. Up in the search bar at the top of the Brave browser, they give you the option to, and if you press one of the icons, it looks like a shield. You can press that, and there's an option to activate script blockers, which is really pretty cool because it allows you to look at many sites like Epoch Times and New York Times, and it will block their script blocker, and you don't need a subscription to view their articles. Now, of course, New York Times is in quite dark contrast to Epoch Times, which tells the truth. The New York Times it used to be a well-respected newspaper, but now it's just a mouth of the government and mainstream media. So it's there for propaganda and to brainwash you. But it's nice to see if you understand that going in, it's okay to look at New York Times to see what they're telling you. And it's interesting because the next thing we're going to talk about is search engines. What do you use instead of Google search? I think that's the next slide. Yes. So New York Times had an article and it was reviewing all the search engines, and whatever they tell you about that, they're of course praising Google search and the reasons why there were some people not to use DuckDuckGo because it's not as good as you think it is, and they're trying to disparage them. And they said the worst of the worst search engines was the Russian search engine called Yandex. So I knew instantly, this was just like last week or 2 weeks ago, that was the best search engine because New York Times said it was the worst. So it's a classic implementation of Orwellian doublespeak. So that right is left, left is right is left, left is right, up is down, down is up. It's just the exact converse of the truth. So if they said it's the worst, it's the best. And I'm having fun with it, actually. But so there's two search engines that I like. One is actually Brave, just a few weeks ago, implemented their own search engine. And you can use that, or Yandex, the Russian search engine. You can do that in Brave. There's on the settings tab, there's a option to select your search engine, and both of those are possible options for you. So every time you type something in the search bar, it'll use Brave or Yandex. Problem with the Brave, though, even though it's complete privacy, both of them are privacy, the Brave tends to use results that are gathered from Google. That's the problem. Even though you can eliminate the privacy component and not allow them to surveil you, they're still controlling the results that you see. So you have to understand that we just don't really have a good option for that right now at this point. And so what do you use for instead Gmail? Well, Proton Mail is one. You could actually, it's not very much, it's a half a gig of storage for free, but it's not terribly expensive. It's $1, $2, a few dollars. It's under $5 a month to get an email service that is encrypted, that essentially is yours and is not they can't be used against you. There's no surveillance component in that. So that is something you can use. So you're also going to need access to, one of the things in surviving this pandemic is access to good information. Just like right now, I mean, last week or two, the Ukraine information has been coming up, and if you've been in a COVID-19 pandemic, that anything the mainstream media tells you is wrong. That was the big lesson. They were telling you misinformation in spades, on steroids. So you have to identify good sources. So I believe our site is one of them. Yet our free newsletter comes out every day. We have 3 articles. We fortunately had to, last year, take all of our articles down because of the threats that I was receiving in my team and my business. So we had to remove them, but we still produce our newsletter every day. And our newsletter articles are up for 48 hours, after which point they are transferred to Substack. And they're put behind a private membership association, which costs $5 a month or $50 a year to join. And that gives us these legal protections that we just don't have by keeping the information up on the internet. So if you value anything we've written in the past, I've gotten 15,000 articles up there in the past I had to take down. And most of them are targeted to be on Substack. And we're in the process of completing all our previous videos, because not only did we have to take the articles down, but YouTube unilaterally decided to take us down, if you can imagine that. Despite the fact that we were beyond extremely careful in uploading any content that would violate their narrative. So we had no strikes against us. And just one day we woke up and both my site, my YouTube channel, and Bobby Kennedy's YouTube channel were taken down because they made a new rule: no warnings, no ability to delete something or change. They just took us down. And the justification was, in the past, we had posted some anti-vax videos, which were up for years, maybe in some cases more than a decade. But they changed the rules, and then we had no time to respond. So anyway, all of those videos will be up on BitChute, and you just type my name and you'll get a list of all the previous videos I've done. So there's no charge for that. So that information is still available. But there are other good people too, such as, one of my favorites is Robert Malone. And I think there are so many good people up there, but he also has a Substack. But better information is to go to his Getter account. That's getter.com, which is an alternative to Twitter. And I look at his feed every day. He is the most prolific and helpful poster about COVID-19 I've ever encountered. I don't know how he does it. I have enormous respect for this man. In my mind, he's the most brilliant, articulate, and one of the most committed people out there to help us understand the truth and provide as objective as possible data-based analysis of what's going on, and give you the truth. If Malone says it, you can almost bet your bottom dollar on it, it's going to be true. So I love his Getter account. I would definitely highly recommend. I think he's participating in this event too. The other thing you're going to need is community. If you don't have one now, you want to really look at this, because there's no way, the President Biden just had a news conference where, I think it's the annual, I forget what they call it, but anyway, he had it just a few days ago, and they announced, it was interesting, when they had this event, none of the people were wearing masks. So it looks like we're winning, like the mask mandates are coming down, the vaccine passports don't seem to be going forward, and all these restrictions that we've had for the last 2 years are disappearing, and it looks like we're winning. But I want to tell you, there's no way we're winning. They are in control. They got this. They own this. This is their game. They're only making it appear that it's a temporary setback. They're going to change some other thing that's going to happen. It's going to be worse in the future. There's little to no doubt in my mind. I'm absolutely convinced of this. So they smashed us for 2 years. Now they're drawing it back, maybe 10, 20%, maybe 30%. and then they're going to go forward again, even much further. So the way to survive this is you've got to be in community. You've got to connect with a group of like-minded people that can be bilaterally useful, so that you can support each other when these times get tougher, because they will get tougher. So what are some aside from being in community, what can you do? Well, you want to have cash on hand, because they're going, just look what they did to the Canadian truckers. I mean, it was such an authoritarian implementation and show of what their plan is. This is the way they attack you. They attack your finances, so they can shut down your bank accounts, and they can make it essentially almost impossible to survive because you have nothing to buy food or pay for shelter for. So you want some cash on hand, just so that you can get things that you need. And obviously you want lots of food and water, ideally enough for 3 to 6 months. Now, I was in my earlier days in high school, I was a Boy Scout. And one of the Boy Scouts motto, you may or may not remember or recognize, is be prepared. And I couldn't recommend that more strongly, is be prepared, because even if you don't use that food and water, it's not going to harm you. I mean, you can eventually go through the food. So you don't want to keep that food there for 10 years. You want to kind of cycle through it so it's always fresh. And in case your supply chain stops, you can have a 3 to 6 months backup. I mean, you really need that much food and water. Now, it's going to be hard to survive too without electricity, because this is the 21st century. So we've developed many dependencies on that. So one of the things you can do is consider solar panels. And I've had solar panels for over a decade now, and haven't paid for most of my electricity that whole time. Other than I have to pay the extortion fee every month because I don't have a smart meter, is what they call them, a smart meter. So I pay the extortion fee and have the company come out and read the meter every month manually. That's the only fee I pay. But otherwise, for the average home, you probably need about 10 to 15 kilowatts. I've got probably 23 kilowatts. That was enough for my home. And the other thing, though, is that the solar panels only work. Actually, the point I wanted to mention on that is that there are subsidies from the government. They can give you tax reliefs, and it was up to like almost 30%, I think, at one time. And they've gradually phased those subsidies out. So if your solar panel system costs $10,000 and there's a 25% rebate from the government on your taxes, it would only cost you $7,500. So that's a good point of consideration. And eventually, what you're paying is returned to you, and you get a payback. It's sort of prepaying your electric bills for the future. Plus, it gives you security when the power grid goes out, which you can and will. Now, I live in Florida, and Florida, we regularly have hurricanes, although we haven't had any for the last 2 years. But when we do get a hurricane, a big one, like a Cat 4 or 5, and I've lived here through several of them, the power supply in the community goes out for 2 weeks, sometimes longer. So, and you say, well, okay, not a big deal. Well, it is a big deal, because not only does your power go out, but your communications go out. So there's no power to the cell phone tower. So no cell phones are working, and there's no internet. So you're pretty much in the woods when the power goes out. So solar panels will let you do that, but it won't give you the juice when the grid is out. So you have to have a backup around that, and that's where you need a generator. Or you can use solar batteries. I have a Tesla Powerwalls. I have a few of them, actually, and with my generators, which are propane gas operated, and the access to the solar panels, I can generate the power, recharge that, and use it, charge up the batteries, and use that to supply the house. Or if the batteries get drained because it's cloudy, I can just charge the batteries directly with the generator. So you would need a battery system to survive when the power grid is down. But if you want to have it for generally, normally when you're going to create more power, ideally you're creating more power than you consume, and then you're selling it back to the electric company, and they will credit you on the bill, so that or credit your account, so that on the months where you use more than you generate, they'll take that out of your reserve, and essentially it washes out. So it's a pretty good deal. But just remember, you'll need powers if the grid is out. Batteries if the grid is out. Anyway, those are my recommendations for you. Hopefully you find them helpful. And as I said, if you are interested in more information, keeping up to date, I would strongly encourage you to go to our website, mercola.com, sign up for the free daily newsletter, and stay strong.